The click of expensive heels echoed through the hallway of the county courthouse. Madison Whitmore walked in like she was entering a boutique, her designer purse swinging from her arm, her phone glued to her hand. At 23 years old, she'd never really faced a problem she couldn't shop her way out of or that Daddy's money couldn't fix. Her lawyer, Mr. Patterson, walked beside her, trying desperately to prep her for what was about to happen. "Madison, please, you need to take this seriously. Judge Thompson doesn't play around. He's fair, but he expects respect." Madison barely looked up from her phone. She was scrolling through pictures from last night's party at the yacht club. Sure. How long is this going to take?" "I have a hair appointment at 3. Mr. Patterson stopped walking and grabbed her arm gently. "Madison, listen to me. You're facing serious charges here. Reckless driving, endangering pedestrians, fleeing from police. This isn't just a speeding ticket." She yanked her arm away and rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, relax. Nobody got hurt. Besides, Daddy already talked to some people. This will all go away like it always does." What Madison didn't know was that her father's usual connections weren't going to help her this time. The incident had made the local news. A crossing guard had nearly been hit. Parents were furious. The pressure was on the court system to actually do something. Inside the courtroom, Madison slumped into her chair and immediately pulled out her phone again. The courtroom was filling up with other cases scheduled that morning. There were people in work uniforms who'd taken time off just to be here. There were nervous-looking defendants with court-appointed lawyers. And then there was Madison, treating the whole thing like a boring waiting room. "Ms. Whitmore, put the phone away," Mr. Patterson whispered urgently. "I'm just checking Instagram. Chill out." An older woman sitting in the gallery behind them shook her head in disbelief. She'd been coming to this courthouse for 30 years as a social worker, and she'd seen plenty of entitled defendants before. But something about Madison's complete lack of awareness bothered her more than usual. The bailiff entered from the side door. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Leonard Thompson presiding. Everyone in the courtroom stood immediately, everyone except Madison, who was still scrolling through her phone, double-tapping a photo of her friend's new car. "Ms. Whitmore," the bailiff said loudly. "Stand up." Madison looked up, annoyed at being interrupted. "What?" "Oh." She slowly stood, making a show of how inconvenient this all was. Judge Thompson entered the courtroom. He was in his late 50s, with gray at his temples and the kind of presence that commanded respect without saying a word. He'd been a judge for 15 years, and before that he'd worked as a public defender in some of the toughest neighborhoods in the city. He'd seen it all, but he never let that make him cynical. He believed in justice, real justice, not the kind you could buy. As he took his seat at the bench, his eyes swept across the courtroom. They landed on Madison for just a moment, taking in her bored expression and the phone she was still holding. His face didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Please be seated," Judge Thompson said. Madison dropped back into her chair with an audible sigh that carried through the quiet courtroom. Mr. Patterson's face went pale. This was already going worse than he'd feared. The judge worked through several cases first. Madison wasn't paying attention to any of them. She'd pulled out a compact mirror and was checking her makeup. When someone else's case involved jail time, she actually giggled quietly and whispered to her lawyer, "Can you imagine?" Mr. Patterson wanted to disappear into the floor. Finally, the clerk called out, "Case number 2847, The People versus Madison Whitmore." Madison stood up slowly, grabbing her purse. She walked to the defendant's table like she was walking onto a stage, very aware that people were looking at her. In her mind, she probably thought she looked confident and unbothered. To everyone else, she looked disrespectful and disconnected from reality. "Ms. Whitmore," Judge Thompson began, looking at the file in front of him. "You're charged with reckless driving, 95 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour school zone. You're also charged with endangering pedestrians and failure to stop for law enforcement. Do you understand these charges?" Madison shrugged. "I guess so." Mr. Patterson quickly jumped in. "Your Honor, my client understands the charges and—" "I was asking your client, counselor," Judge Thompson said calmly. His voice wasn't harsh, but it was firm. "Ms. Whitmore, do you understand the charges against you? Yes or no?" "Yeah, I understand," Madison said, examining her nails. "But can we speed this up? I really do have somewhere to be." A few people in the gallery gasped quietly. Judge Thompson's expression didn't change, but his pen stopped moving across the paper in front of him. The prosecutor, a woman named District Attorney Chen, stood up to present the state's case. She outlined the incident in detail. Madison had been driving her Mercedes at nearly 100 miles per hour through a school zone at 8:15 in the morning. Children were crossing the street to get to school. Mrs. Barbara Johnson, who'd been a crossing guard for 22 years, had to literally push two kids backward to avoid them being hit. When officers tried to pull Madison over, she kept driving for another 2 miles before finally stopping in the parking lot of a coffee shop. When asked why she didn't stop, she told the officer she didn't want to get a ticket. As the prosecutor spoke, Madison was literally filing her nails. The sound of the nail file scraping carried through the quiet courtroom. Judge Thompson's jaw tightened slightly, but he let the prosecutor finish. "Your Honor," Mr. Patterson said when it was his turn, "my client acknowledges that she made a mistake. She's young and she's learned her lesson. We'd ask the court to consider a fine in traffic school, given that this is her first offense." "First offense on record," the prosecutor corrected. "Ms. Whitmore has had 3 previous traffic violations that were dismissed after donations were made to various city programs." Madison's head snapped up. "Those were dropped. They don't count." "Ms. Whitmore," Judge Thompson said, "you'll speak when spoken to. Is that clear?" "Whatever," Madison muttered, but just loud enough for the microphone to catch it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Experienced court watchers in the gallery knew that look on Judge Thompson's face. He was a patient man, but his patience had limits. "Excuse me?" Judge Thompson said, his voice still calm but with an edge now. Mr. Patterson grabbed Madison's arm under the table, squeezing hard, trying to signal her to shut up. But Madison had spent her entire life being told she was special, being told that rules were for other people. She had no idea she was standing on the edge of a cliff. "I said whatever, Your Honor," Madison repeated, adding the title like it was a joke. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? Is that what you want to hear?" "I'm sorry. Now can I just pay the fine and go?" Judge Thompson sat back in his chair, studying the young woman in front of him. He'd presided over thousands of cases. He'd seen remorseful defendants who'd made terrible mistakes. He'd seen scared kids who'd gotten in over their heads. He'd seen hardened criminals who didn't care about anything. But Madison Whitmore was something different. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't scared. She genuinely believed that this was all just an inconvenience, a minor bump in her otherwise perfect life, and that made her dangerous, not just to herself but to everyone around her. "No, Ms. Whitmore," Judge Thompson said quietly. "You cannot just pay the fine and go. Please remain standing. We're going to take a 15-minute recess and then we'll continue with this case." He stood, and everyone in the courtroom rose with him. Everyone except Madison, who stayed seated until the bailiff practically pulled her to her feet. As Judge Thompson exited to his chambers, Mr. Patterson turned to Madison, his face red with anger and fear. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? Any idea at all?" Madison crossed her arms. "What?" "I said I was sorry." "No," Mr. Patterson said, his voice shaking. "You really didn't." During the recess, Mr. Patterson practically dragged Madison into a small conference room down the hall. His usual calm demeanor was completely gone. He was sweating, loosening his tie, pacing back and forth while Madison sat there looking at him like he was overreacting. "Madison, I need you to understand something," he said, his voice tight. "Judge Thompson is one of the most respected judges in this county. He came from nothing. Worked his way through law school while holding down 3 jobs. He doesn't care who your father is. He doesn't care about your money. And right now you're making him very, very angry." Madison rolled her eyes and pulled out her lip gloss. "Oh, please. He's just trying to scare me. That's what judges do, right? They act all tough and then you pay some money and leave." Mr. Patterson stopped pacing and stared at her. "That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works." "It's worked every other time," Madison shot back. "Remember that thing last year with a DUI? Daddy made one phone call and it disappeared. Or that time I crashed into that guy's car at the mall. Gone, so why is this any different?" "Because," Mr. Patterson said slowly, trying to make her understand, "Judge Thompson can't be bought. And you've spent the last 20 minutes showing him exactly the kind of person you are. A person who thinks laws don't apply to her. A person who thinks she's better than everyone else in that courtroom." Madison stood up, irritated now. "I am better than them. Did you see those people out there? Half of them looked like they came here straight from their shift at McDonald's or something." Mr. Patterson closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He'd been practicing law for 30 years, and this might be the hardest client he'd ever had. Not because the case was complicated, but because she refused to help herself. "Listen to me very carefully," he said. "When we go back in there, I need you to be quiet. Don't speak unless the judge asks you a direct question. And if he does ask you something, say, 'Yes, Your Honor,' or 'No, Your Honor.' That's it. Can you do that?" "Fine," Madison said, checking her reflection in a compact mirror. "Can we just get this over with?" They walked back into the courtroom. The gallery had filled up even more during the break. Word had spread through the courthouse that something interesting was happening in Judge Thompson's courtroom, and court staff on their breaks had slipped in to watch. Judge Thompson returned to the bench. His face was composed, professional, showing nothing. But the people who worked with him every day could sense something different about him. He'd made a decision during that recess. "Ms. Whitmore, please approach the bench with your attorney," Judge Thompson said. Madison walked forward, her heels clicking on the floor. She stood there with one hip cocked to the side, her purse still on her shoulder. Mr. Patterson stood rigidly beside her, practically radiating anxiety. "Ms. Whitmore," Judge Thompson began, "I've reviewed your file during the recess. I see that you've had 3 previous traffic violations. All of them were dismissed after what the records call community contributions were made. See?" Madison said, turning to her lawyer with a smile. "I told you." "Ms. Whitmore, I wasn't finished," Judge Thompson said, his voice sharp now. "Those previous violations include texting while driving, running a red light, and driving under the influence. The only reason you're not facing more serious charges today is because by some miracle you haven't killed anyone yet." Madison's smile faded a little. "That's not fair. The DUI thing was blown way out of proportion. I only had like 2 drinks. 2 drinks, and then you drove your car into a mailbox," the prosecutor added from her table. "It was just a mailbox," Madison said, her voice rising. "And besides, my dad paid for it, so what's the problem?" Judge Thompson leaned forward. "The problem, Ms. Whitmore, is that you're standing in my courtroom facing charges that could have resulted in the death of children. Children who were simply trying to get to school. And you're acting like this is all just an inconvenience to your day." Madison shrugged. "Well, I mean, nobody did get hurt, so why are we acting like I'm some kind of criminal? I just drive fast sometimes. Lots of people drive fast." 95 miles per hour in a school zone is not just driving fast, Judge Thompson said. It's reckless. It's dangerous. And it shows a complete disregard for human life. "Oh my God," Madison said, throwing her hands up. "You're being so dramatic about this. Maybe if you'd ever driven a car that could actually go fast, you'd understand. My Mercedes is made for speed." The courtroom went completely silent. Mr. Patterson's face turned white. Several people in the gallery gasped. Even the court reporter looked up from her machine in shock. Judge Thompson sat back in his chair slowly. "Excuse me." Madison, completely missing the danger she was in, kept talking. "I'm just saying, Your Honor. Maybe you don't understand what it's like to have places to be and things to do. Some of us have busy lives. I had a meeting that morning at my dad's office. I couldn't be late." "So you nearly killed 2 children because you couldn't be late to a meeting," Judge Thompson said. "It wasn't a question." "I didn't nearly kill anyone," Madison said, exasperated. "They weren't even in the street yet. That crossing guard lady was totally overreacting. She probably just wanted attention or something." Mr. Patterson tried to step in. "Your Honor, my client doesn't mean—" "Let her talk," Judge Thompson said quietly. "I want to hear what she has to say." And that was Madison's final chance. If she'd stopped right there, if she'd apologized, if she'd shown even a tiny bit of remorse, things might have gone differently. But Madison had never learned when to stop talking. "Look," she said, her voice taking on a condescending tone. "I get that you probably have to be tough on crime or whatever. That's your job. But be realistic here. You're really going to ruin my life over a little traffic violation? Do you know who my father is? He's friends with the mayor. He's donated millions to this city. I don't care if your father is friends with the president," Judge Thompson said. "In this courtroom, you are not your father's daughter. You are a defendant who stands accused of serious crimes." Madison laughed. Actually laughed. "Serious crimes, please. You want to talk about serious crimes? There are real criminals out there. Drug dealers and murderers and stuff. And you're wasting time on me driving too fast?" Then she said something that changed everything. She looked Judge Thompson right in the eye and said, "Maybe you should focus on people who actually look like criminals instead of harassing innocent people like me. I mean, isn't that what you people usually do anyway?" The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in that courtroom knew exactly what she meant by "you people." The prosecutor's mouth fell open. The bailiff, who'd been standing near the door, actually took a step forward before stopping himself. Mr. Patterson grabbed Madison's arm. "Your Honor, I apologize. Your client is clearly showing her true colors," Judge Thompson said. His voice was steady, but there was steel in it now. "Ms. Whitmore, did you just make assumptions about me based on the color of my skin?" Madison realized she might have crossed a line, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. It was what she always did. "I'm just saying, Your Honor, that maybe you have certain biases. My dad said that sometimes judges in this courthouse have agendas, and I have to wonder if you're being extra hard on me because of where I come from." "Where you come from?" Judge Thompson repeated slowly. "You mean from wealth? From privilege?" "I mean, yeah," Madison said. "It's not fair to punish someone just because they're successful." Judge Thompson nodded slowly. "I see. So in your mind, I'm the one with bias. I'm the one who's being unfair? Not you, the person who nearly ran over children and then fled from police. Not you, the person who's shown zero remorse. Not you, the person who just made assumptions about my character based on my race." "I never said anything about race," Madison protested, but her voice was less confident now. "You didn't have to," Judge Thompson said. "Ms. Whitmore, I've been a judge for 15 years. I've seen defendants from every background imaginable. Rich, poor, every race, every religion, and I've treated every single one of them with the same standard of justice. But you walk into my courtroom acting like the laws don't apply to you, and when faced with consequences, you resort to racist implications and disrespect." Madison's face flushed red. "That's not what I meant." "You're twisting my words, am I?" Judge Thompson said. "Then please, Ms. Whitmore, explain to me what you meant by "you people." Madison looked at her lawyer desperately. Mr. Patterson looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. There was nothing he could do now. Nothing he could say to fix this. I meant judges," Madison stammered. "That's all." "We both know that's not what you meant," Judge Thompson said. He picked up his gavel and everyone in the courtroom tensed. They could feel what was coming. "Ms. Whitmore, I'm going to take another short recess to review the full extent of sentencing options available to me, and I suggest you spend that time thinking very carefully about the hole you've dug for yourself." He stood, and this time when everyone rose, Madison's legs were shaking. As Judge Thompson left the courtroom, she finally realized that maybe, just maybe, she was in real trouble. The second recess felt different from the first. Mr. Patterson didn't even try to talk to Madison this time. He just sat at the defense table with his head in his hands while Madison stood by the window, her confidence finally starting to crack. "This is insane," she muttered, pulling out her phone to call her father. "Daddy will fix this. He always does." But when her father answered, even he sounded worried. "Madison, what did you do?" "I just got a call from Judge Thompson's clerk. They're saying you made inappropriate comments." "I didn't do anything," Madison insisted. "The judge is just being unreasonable. He's got some kind of problem with me." Her father was quiet for a moment. "Madison, I've made some calls. This judge, he can't be influenced. And if what they're telling me is true, if you really said what they say you said, I can't help you this time." Madison felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean you can't help me?" "You always help me." "I can't make this go away," her father said, and for the first time in her life, Madison heard something in his voice she'd never heard before. Disappointment. "You're on your own with this one, sweetheart. I suggest you apologize and pray he goes easy on you." He hung up. Madison stared at her phone in disbelief. Her safety net, the one that had always been there, was gone. In his chambers, Judge Thompson sat at his desk, looking at the file in front of him. Mrs. Barbara Johnson, the crossing guard Madison had nearly hit, had written a victim impact statement. He read it again, even though he'd already read it twice. "I've been a crossing guard for 22 years, Mrs. Johnson had written. "I love those children like they're my own grandchildren. That morning I saw that car coming so fast and I knew she wasn't going to stop. Little Tyler and his sister Mia were right there in the crosswalk. I pushed them back so hard that Tyler scraped his knee on the pavement. But that scrape saved his life. When I close my eyes at night, I still see that car. I still see how close we came to tragedy, and what haunts me most is that the driver didn't even stop to see if we were okay. She just kept going like we didn't matter at all. Judge Thompson set down the statement and looked at the sentencing guidelines in front of him. He'd been on the bench long enough to know that this moment mattered. Not just for Madison Whitmore, but for every entitled defendant who thought money could buy them out of consequences. And for every person who'd been looked down on, discriminated against, or treated as less than human. The bailiff knocked on his door. "Your Honor, everyone's back in the courtroom." Judge Thompson stood, straightened his robe, and walked back into the courtroom. The gallery was packed now. Word had spread through social media that something big was happening. Local reporters had even shown up, cameras ready. Madison stood at the defense table, and for the first time all day, she wasn't looking at her phone. She was staring straight ahead, and there was real fear in her eyes now. "Please be seated," Judge Thompson said as he took his place at the bench. He opened the file in front of him and took his time reviewing it. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. "You could have heard a pin drop, Ms. Whitmore," he finally said. "I want you to understand something. This court does not take pleasure in sentencing anyone. My job is not to punish people because I'm angry, or because they've offended me personally. My job is to ensure justice is served and to protect the community." Madison nodded quickly, hope flickering across her face. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. "That being said," Judge Thompson continued, "I've reviewed your case thoroughly. Your driving record, your behavior in this courtroom, and the statements from the victims you endangered. And I've come to a conclusion about what justice looks like in your case." He looked directly at Madison. "You came into this courtroom believing that you were above the law. You showed no remorse for nearly killing 2 children, and when faced with the consequences of your actions, you chose to insult this court and make racist assumptions about me based on the color of my skin." Madison opened her mouth to protest, but Mr. Patterson grabbed her arm and shook his head firmly. "Your behavior today has shown me that you are not just a reckless driver," Judge Thompson said. "You are someone who genuinely believes that other people's lives matter less than your convenience, that their safety is less important than your schedule. And that kind of thinking makes you dangerous." He picked up his gavel and everyone leaned forward. "For the charge of reckless driving in a school zone, I sentence you to 6 months in county jail. For endangering pedestrians, an additional 3 months to run consecutively. For fleeing from law enforcement, another 3 months. That's 1 year total," Madison gasped. Her knees actually buckled and she had to grab the table to stay standing. "A year? You can't be serious." "I'm not finished," Judge Thompson said, his voice cutting through her protest. "You'll also pay a fine of $10,000. Your driver's license is suspended for 5 years, not 3. And when you're released from jail, you'll serve 2 years of probation." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Madison was crying now, real tears streaming down her face. "Please, Your Honor, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean what I said." Judge Thompson held up his hand for silence. "Now we get to the part that I've given the most thought to, Ms. Whitmore. Your sentence also includes 500 hours of community service." Madison's lawyer actually looked relieved. Community service wasn't so bad, but Judge Thompson wasn't done. "Those 500 hours will be served working as a crossing guard at elementary schools in underserved neighborhoods. The same job that Mrs. Barbara Johnson does. The same job you endangered with your reckless driving. You'll stand outside in the rain, in the cold, in the heat. You'll hold children's hands as they cross the street. And you'll learn what it means to put someone else's safety above your own convenience." Madison's mouth fell open. The gallery behind her was buzzing with reactions. Some people were nodding in approval. Others looked shocked. "Additionally," Judge Thompson continued, "you'll attend a cultural sensitivity and racial bias training program. You'll complete it before your release from jail, and you'll write a 50-page essay on the history of the American justice system and the civil rights movement. That essay will be reviewed by a panel of educators, and it must meet their standards before your sentence is considered complete." "Your Honor," Mr. Patterson said, standing up. "With all due respect, this seems excessive for a traffic violation." Judge Thompson looked at the attorney. "This isn't just about a traffic violation anymore, counselor. This is about a pattern of behavior that shows a fundamental lack of respect for the law, for this court, and for human life. Your client had multiple opportunities today to show remorse, to take responsibility, to be a decent human being. She chose not to take any of them." He turned back to Madison. "Ms. Whitmore, you walked into this courtroom thinking you were better than everyone here. You made assumptions about me based on stereotypes and prejudice. You dismissed the lives you endangered as inconsequential. Well, now you're going to learn what real consequences feel like. Madison was sobbing openly now. I'm sorry. I really am. Please, I can't go to jail. I've never been in trouble before. Not real trouble. That's the problem, Judge Thompson said, and his voice softened just slightly. You've never faced real consequences. Every time you've broken the law, someone has swooped in to save you. Your father, his lawyers, his money. But that's not how the real world works for most people. And it's certainly not how it's going to work in my courtroom. He banged his gavel once. Bailiff, please take Ms. Whitmore into custody. The bailiff stepped forward. Madison actually tried to run, taking 2 steps backward before the bailiff gently but firmly took her arm. No, please. I'll do anything. I'll pay more money. My father will donate to charity, please. Ms. Whitmore, Judge Thompson said, this concludes your sentencing. You have the right to appeal this decision, and your attorney can explain that process to you. But I want to leave you with something to think about during your time in jail. Madison was being handcuffed now, still crying, her expensive makeup running down her face. What you did today, Judge Thompson said, what you said, the assumptions you made about me, they weren't just offensive. They were wrong. I grew up in poverty. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college and law school. I've dedicated my entire career to fair and equal justice for everyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from. And I will not allow anyone to walk into my courtroom and suggest that I'm anything less than fair because of the color of my skin. He paused, making sure Madison was looking at him. I hope you use your time in jail wisely. I hope you think about the lives you endangered. I hope you think about your privilege and what it's cost you. And most importantly, I hope you become a better person, because the person standing in front of me right now is someone who desperately needs to change. Madison was led out of the courtroom, still crying, still protesting. The gallery watched in stunned silence. Some people were pulling out their phones, already posting about what they'd just witnessed. Mr. Patterson packed up his briefcase slowly, looking defeated. He'd tried to warn her. He'd tried to save her from herself. But some people had to learn the hard way. As the courtroom cleared out, Judge Thompson sat alone at his bench for a moment. Within 2 hours of Madison being led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the video was everywhere. Someone in the gallery had recorded the whole thing on their phone. The clip of Madison saying, "You people," and Judge Thompson's response went viral faster than anyone could have imagined. By evening, it had been shared over 1 million times. News outlets picked it up. Legal analysts were discussing it on television. People were debating it on every social media platform. Some praised Judge Thompson for his measured response. Others argued about whether the sentence was too harsh. But everyone was talking about it. Madison's father watched the video in his office, his face growing paler with each second. He'd built his real estate empire over 30 years, carefully cultivating relationships and a reputation. Now, in less than 3 minutes of video, his daughter had damaged all of it. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Business partners calling to discuss concerns. Charity organizations returning his donations. The country club president suggesting that maybe the family should take some time away from club activities. Even the mayor, his supposed friend, sent a carefully worded text message creating distance between them. At the county jail, Madison was going through processing. They took her designer purse, her jewelry, her phone. Everything that made her feel like herself was stripped away and locked in a property box. She was given an orange jumpsuit that smelled like industrial detergent and cheap fabric. "I need to call my lawyer," Madison kept saying to anyone who would listen. "This is a mistake. I shouldn't be here." The intake officer, a woman named Officer Rivera who'd worked at the jail for 12 years, had seen hundreds of inmates come through. Rich ones, poor ones, everything in between. But she'd never seen anyone quite as unprepared for reality as Madison Whitmore. "You'll get your phone call," Officer Rivera said calmly, "after processing is complete." "After? I need to call now. Do you know who my father is?" Officer Rivera didn't even look up from her paperwork. "I don't care if your father is the president. Everyone goes through the same process here." Madison was assigned to a cell with 3 other women. One was in for theft, another for drug possession, and the third for violating probation. They all looked at Madison like she was from another planet when she walked in wearing her orange jumpsuit, still crying, mascara smudged all over her face. First time? Asked the woman on the bottom bunk whose name was Crystal. She was 32 and had been in and out of jail for years, usually for things like driving with a suspended license because she couldn't afford to pay old traffic tickets. Madison nodded, unable to speak. She sat on the only empty bunk and pulled her knees to her chest. "What are you in for?" Crystal asked, not unkindly. "Reckless driving," Madison whispered. The other women exchanged glances. One of them, Tasha, laughed. "Just reckless driving? And you got jail time? What did you do, run over somebody?" "I almost hit some kids," Madison admitted. "But I didn't." "They were fine. Almost only counts in horseshoes," Tasha said. "But still, jail time for that? You must have really pissed off the judge." Madison was quiet. She didn't want to tell them what she'd said, what she'd done. But in jail, word travels fast. By the next morning, everyone knew. Someone's cousin had seen the video. Someone's friend worked at the courthouse. By breakfast, Madison Whitmore was famous in all the wrong ways. "Oh, you're that girl," one inmate said in the cafeteria line. "The one who was racist to Judge Thompson." Madison felt everyone's eyes on her. Some looked at her with disgust. Others with a kind of satisfied karma. Nobody looked at her with sympathy. Meanwhile, outside the jail, the media frenzy continued. Legal experts were being interviewed on every news channel. Professor Davis from the state law school appeared on the morning news. Judge Thompson's sentence was completely within his authority, the professor explained. Every element of it was legally sound. The jail time fit the charges. The community service was creative but appropriate. And the cultural sensitivity training addresses the behavioral issues the defendant displayed in court. But not everyone agreed. Some lawyers argued the sentence was too harsh. Some said Judge Thompson had overstepped. The debate raged online, with people taking sides without really understanding what had happened in that courtroom. Judge Thompson himself didn't watch any of it. He'd gone home that evening, had dinner with his wife of 28 years, and gone to bed. He'd made his decision, and he stood by it. The court of public opinion wasn't his concern. Justice was back at the jail. Madison's first night was the longest of her life. The lights never fully went off. There were sounds she'd never heard before. Metal doors clanging, people crying, guards walking past every hour. She couldn't sleep on the thin mattress. She couldn't get comfortable. She couldn't stop thinking about how she'd gotten here. Her cellmate Crystal, surprisingly, was kind to her. "First night's always the hardest," she said in the darkness. "You'll adjust." "I don't want to adjust," Madison said. "I shouldn't be here." "Yeah, well, most of us think that," Crystal replied. "But here's the thing. You are here. So you can either spend your time crying about it, or you can use it to figure out how you're going to be different when you get out." Madison didn't respond, but the words stuck with her. By the end of the first week, Madison had lost 8 pounds. The food was terrible. The routine was mind-numbing. Wake up at 6. Breakfast at 7. Then hours of nothing. No phone, no internet, no shopping. No friends. Just endless time to think about what she'd done. She finally got to call her father. The conversation was brief and painful. "Daddy, please get me out of here," she begged. "Please, I can't do this." "Madison, I've talked to 5 different lawyers. They all say the same thing. Judge Thompson's sentence was legal. We can appeal, but it will take months and there's no guarantee we'll win." "So you're just giving up on me?" Madison's voice cracked. Her father sighed. "I'm not giving up on you. But for the first time in your life, you have to face consequences that I can't fix. Maybe that's what you need." He hung up and Madison stood there holding the phone, feeling more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. The video continued to spread. It was analyzed in law schools, discussed in churches, debated at dinner tables across the country. Judge Thompson became something of a folk hero to people who were tired of seeing wealthy defendants buy their way out of justice. But he also became a target for those who thought he'd gone too far. He received threats, angry letters, but he also received thousands of letters of support. Parents thanking him for taking a stand, teachers praising his sentence, people who'd been marginalized or discriminated against telling him they appreciated what he'd done. Madison's father's business continued to suffer. 3 major deals fell through. Partners backed out of projects. The family name, once associated with success and wealth, was now associated with entitlement and racism. His wife stopped going to her yoga class because of the stares. His son, Madison's younger brother, was bullied at his private school. The whole family was paying for Madison's mistakes, and that weight started to press down on her as the weeks passed. In week 3, Madison attended her first cultural sensitivity training session. The instructor was a retired college professor named Dr. Williams, a black man in his 60s who'd spent his career studying civil rights and social justice. He didn't coddle her. He didn't make it easy. He made her watch documentaries about the civil rights movement. He made her read first-hand accounts of discrimination. He made her confront uncomfortable truths about privilege and bias that she'd never had to think about before. "Why do I have to do this?" Madison asked after one particularly difficult session. "I'm not racist. I have black friends." Dr. Williams looked at her over his glasses. "Having black friends doesn't mean you can't have biases. We all have them. The question is whether you're willing to acknowledge them and work on them." "I didn't mean what I said in court," Madison insisted. "I was just upset." "But you did say it," Dr. Williams replied. "And what we say when we're upset often reveals what we really think. The anger doesn't create those thoughts, it just removes the filter." For the first time, Madison didn't have a comeback. She just sat there thinking. By week 4, something started to shift. Maybe it was the monotony of jail. Maybe it was the training sessions. Maybe it was just exhaustion from fighting reality. But Madison started to actually listen, started to actually think about what she'd done. She started reading the books Dr. Williams assigned. She started paying attention in the training sessions instead of just waiting for them to end. And slowly, uncomfortably, she started to see herself differently. Not as the victim in this story, but as the villain. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done, admitting to herself that she'd been wrong, that she'd been cruel, that she'd been everything Judge Thompson had said she was in that courtroom. One night, lying in her bunk, she whispered to Crystal in the darkness, "How do you forgive yourself for being a bad person?" Crystal was quiet for a moment. "I don't think you do," she finally said. "I think you just try to be better tomorrow than you were today, and then you do it again the next day. And the day after that, eventually, maybe you become someone you can live with." Madison served 8 months of her sentence before being released early for good behavior. The woman who walked out of county jail was not the same person who'd walked in. Her designer clothes hung loosely on her now thinner frame. Her hair, once perfectly styled, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. But the biggest change wasn't visible. It was in her eyes. The entitlement was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. Her father picked her up in his car, not the usual chauffeur-driven limousine. The ride home was quiet. Madison stared out the window at the world she'd been away from, seeing it differently now. The people walking on the sidewalks, the crossing guards at school zones, the police officers directing traffic. She'd never really seen them before. They'd just been background noise in her life. "Your mother's at home," her father said finally. "It's been hard for her." "I know," Madison said quietly. "I'm sorry." Her father glanced at her, surprised. Madison had never been one to apologize easily. "The house is different now. We've had to make some changes, cut back on some things." Madison learned just how much had changed when she got home. 3 of their 5 cars were gone, sold to cover legal fees and declining business revenue. The housekeeping staff had been reduced to just 1 person coming twice a week instead of daily. Her mother's jewelry collection, once extensive, had been significantly downsized. But the biggest shock came when Madison went to her room. Her closets, once bursting with designer clothes and shoes, had been cleaned out. Most of it had been donated. "We couldn't keep paying for storage and maintenance," her mother explained, standing in the doorway. She looked older, more tired than Madison remembered. "And honestly, after everything that happened, it felt wrong to have so much excess." Madison nodded. A few months ago, she would have screamed, would have thrown a tantrum. But now, standing in her nearly empty room, she just felt a strange sense of relief, like someone had lifted a weight she didn't even know she was carrying. The next morning, Madison started her community service. She reported to Lincoln Elementary School at 6:30 in the morning, just as the sun was coming up. The school was in a neighborhood she'd never visited before, the kind of place she would have driven through with her doors locked just a year ago. Mrs. Helen Patterson, the head crossing guard, was waiting for her. She was 65 years old with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She'd been doing this job for 18 years. "You must be Madison," Mrs. Patterson said, handing her a bright yellow safety vest and a stop sign. "I read about your case. Judge Thompson is my nephew." Madison's heart sank. Of course. Of all the crossing guards in the city, She had to be assigned to the judge's aunt. "I know what you're thinking," Mrs. Patterson said, seeing Madison's face. "But I asked for you specifically. My nephew told me about your sentence, and I thought, this girl needs to learn what this job really means." For the first few days, Madison just followed Mrs. Patterson's lead. She learned how to watch for cars, how to time the crossings, how to make eye contact with drivers to ensure they saw you. But most importantly, she learned about the kids. There was 7-year-old Deshaun, who always gave her a high five as he crossed. There was little Amira, who was shy and held Madison's hand extra tight. There were the twins, Carlos and Camilla, who raced each other to the crosswalk every morning. These weren't just anonymous children. They were real people with names and personalities and lives that mattered. One morning, about 2 weeks into her service, a car came speeding down the street. Madison saw it immediately. She stepped into the crosswalk with her stop sign, her heart pounding, and held up her hand. The car screeched to a halt just a few feet from her. The driver, a young woman in her 20s, rolled down her window. "I'm late for work. Can you hurry up?" Madison looked at the children crossing behind her. Then she looked at the driver, and she saw herself, the old version of herself, the one who thought being late was more important than people's safety. "Ma'am," Madison said calmly, "these children's lives are worth more than your job. Please slow down in school zones." The driver's face flushed and she nodded, looking ashamed. As she drove away carefully, Mrs. Patterson came up beside Madison. "Good job," she said simply. But those 2 words meant more to Madison than any compliment she'd ever received about her looks or her clothes or her father's money. The months passed. Fall turned to winter, and Madison stood outside in the cold and rain helping kids cross the street. Her hands got chapped. Her feet hurt. But she kept showing up. Every single day, the kids started to love her. They'd wave when they saw her. They'd tell her about their days. Their little problems became her problems. When Deshaun missed a week because he was sick, Madison worried about him. When Amira's family was being evicted, Madison used her own money to help them pay the rent. It was the first time in her life she'd spent money on someone else without expecting anything in return. And it felt better than any shopping spree ever had. Dr. Williams, her cultural sensitivity instructor, noticed the change too. Madison had completed her 50-page essay on the civil rights movement and the justice system. But it wasn't just a paper written to fulfill a requirement. It was thoughtful, honest, and showed real understanding. "You've done good work," Dr. Williams told her during their final session. "But the real test isn't what you've learned. It's what you do with it." Madison took those words seriously. She started volunteering beyond her required hours. She began speaking at schools about the dangers of reckless driving and the importance of privilege awareness. It was terrifying at first, standing in front of students and admitting what she'd done, who she'd been, but it was also freeing. One day, about 10 months after her sentencing, Madison was at the crosswalk when a luxury car pulled up. A young woman about her age was driving, talking on her phone, barely paying attention. Madison stepped into the crosswalk and the woman rolled her eyes, annoyed at having to stop. Madison walked to the driver's window. The woman lowered it impatiently. "What?" "I used to be you," Madison said quietly. "I used to think my time was more important than everyone else's safety. And it almost cost children their lives. Please, slow down. Be careful. These kids matter." The woman stared at her, recognition dawning on her face. "Wait, you're that girl." "From the video." Madison nodded. "Yeah, I'm that girl. And I'm trying really hard not to be her anymore." The woman's expression softened. I'll slow down. I'm sorry." As the car drove away carefully, Mrs. Patterson squeezed Madison's shoulder. "You're doing real good, honey. Real good." The day of Madison's final court appearance arrived. She stood before Judge Thompson again, but this time she stood differently. Her shoulders were back, her head was up, but there was no arrogance. Just quiet dignity. Judge Thompson reviewed her file. Every hour of community service completed. Every training session attended with perfect attendance. Letters from Mrs. Patterson, from Dr. Williams, from the school principal, all speaking to her transformation. "Ms. Whitmore," Judge Thompson said, "when I sentenced you a year ago, I hoped you would use that time to become a better person. I'm pleased to see that you have." Madison's eyes filled with tears, but she kept her composure. "Your Honor, I want to thank you. A year ago, I would have said you ruined my life, but the truth is you saved it. You saved me from becoming someone who might have eventually killed someone with my recklessness and entitlement. You held up a mirror and forced me to see who I really was, and I didn't like what I saw." She paused, gathering her courage. "I also want to apologize. Publicly and sincerely. What I said to you in this courtroom was racist, disrespectful, and wrong. I made assumptions about you based on your race, and I'm ashamed of that. You've dedicated your life to justice, and I treated you with contempt. I'm sorry." The courtroom was silent. Judge Thompson nodded slowly. "I accept your apology, Ms. Whitmore, and I want you to know that I never took pleasure in your sentence. But I believed then, and I believe now, that sometimes people need to face real consequences to become who they're meant to be." He stamped her file. "Your sentence is complete. Your probation ends today, but I hope the lessons you've learned continue for the rest of your life." Madison left the courthouse a free woman. Outside, reporters were waiting, but she'd learned to handle them now. She made a brief statement thanking Judge Thompson, apologizing again for her actions, and encouraging other young people to learn from her mistakes without having to make them first. Mrs. Patterson was there too, with several of the kids from the crosswalk. They'd made her a card covered in crayon drawings and messages. "We'll miss you. Thank you for keeping us safe. You're the best." Madison hugged them all, crying freely now. These children, these beautiful kids who'd never judged her for her past, who'd just accepted her for who she was trying to become, had taught her more about grace and forgiveness than she'd ever known. That evening, Madison sat with her parents at dinner. It was just the three of them, no staff, no pretense. They'd sold the big house and moved to something smaller but more comfortable. Her father's business was slowly recovering. They'd never be quite as wealthy as before, but they were still comfortable. "So what are you going to do now?" her mother asked. Madison had been thinking about that a lot.